A lot of people don't want to accept this, but the reality is that China is a global power right now, and it's pretty much the only threat to the United States. China is an old empire. Throughout history, this country was always kind of important, and the reason for that were the people that were hard workers and built, and unlike the Mongols, they wouldn't destroy other empires. You probably know the Great Wall of China. This wall is one of the oldest structures humans have ever built, and the reason for this was to separate the Northerners from coming into China, because the Northerners always harassed China. The Mongols wouldn't attack to conquer, but they would attack to steal. Building this wall started about 2,700 years ago, and the wall you see now took 2,000 years to finish, meaning until the year 1300, they continued expanding this thing. Do you know why it stopped at 1300? Because that's the time that the Mongols attacked China and conquered it. And this is the same time that Beijing became the capital of China. Meaning Beijing is a capital that was chosen by the Mongols. At the time where Mongol took control of China, a Westerner was approaching. It was the first time that a Westerner enters China, and he was Marco Polo. This video isn't really about the Mongols, but you should know that they kept conquering towards the west and went all the way to Europe. But Mongols weren't really leaders, and that is why, a few decades later, China took control of their land again. Meaning in the year 1368, China was in Chinese hand again. If you look at the history of China, just like old empires, it goes up and down. There are times where everybody is in peace, and there are times everybody's starving and depressed. The darkest time of China, where it was really bad, was just recently, meaning from the start of the 19th century. These are the times where starvation took over. There were so many people, and the government couldn't feed all its people. China was starting to get better until in 1931, Japan attacked. In 1931, Japan took control of China. The Japanese tried everything on the Chinese people. If you've seen the Unit 731 video we made, you'll see what the Japanese did to the Chinese. After World War II, where Japan was defeated, China took control of its land again, but it was a country that had to start from square one. After a few years later than World War II, Mao Zedong became the leader of China. In terms of dictatorship, Mao Zedong was on top of the food chain, meaning whatever he said had to happen. But this dictator laid out the foundation for today's economy for China. But don't think he was like a saving grace angel that came to save China, because a lot of people in China during his time died. If you've seen the video of the most ruthless dictators of all time, you'll see how many people Mao Zedong killed. You should know that communism never worked in any country, except for China. Because the way Mao introduced communism, it really lifted off China's economy, because there was no other way to make this country better with this insane amount of population. There were so many people that they couldn't feed everybody. The Chinese starvation wasn't because of laziness. They were extremely hard workers, but there was food shortage. But Mao Zedong put this foundation, and then he died. You could say he didn't really mean to do it, because he didn't know it will work out in the long run. The leaders that came after Mao really kept the same style as him. And this means that after the 1970s, China and Chinese people itself became a lot more organized. To help with starvation, the Chinese government put the one-child law in order, so they can control the population. In the 80s, China was in a spot where every investor in the world wanted to invest in China because there was cheap labor and plenty of them, cheap land and plenty of it, and the most important one is that there was no law for environmental reasons. To take advantage of this, most corporations jumped headfirst to all of this and invested immediately. This caused the starvation to get fixed, but poverty was still there. All this money that came into the country caused a lot of billionaires to be born. But poverty was still there. In 1989, the first time a communist country opened up its stock market. This also helped with the Chinese economy. After 1991, when the USSR got demolished, China and Russia's relationship got friendly, and they started trading again. It was unbelievable that in the 90s, China became the third most largest economy in the entire world, right behind Japan and the US. In the beginning of the 2000s, China joined the World Trade Organization. Entering this organization helped China with the exports. The economy was rapidly growing, but modern laws were not found. Meaning, whoever was working, they would work until their last breath. And these are in bad environments. They would have Chinese workers in a dangerous, very close to each other work environment, so they can work for more than 16 hours. Even though poverty wasn't eliminated, but China kept getting richer and richer. The Chinese army also got more powerful over time. In the year 2006, China wanted to help out with poverty, and that is why they built the biggest dam in the world. China was so focused in improving in its economy that it forgot about the employees that ran it. Everywhere was polluted. Since there were no environmental rules, industries would pollute the air and water like no tomorrow. And that was when the Chinese government put some rules in action. But not really strict laws. Eventually in 2010, China became the largest exporter in the world. It passed Japan by a mile and became the second largest economy in the world. Starvation was eliminated, homelessness was eliminated, but poverty was still active, and the quality of the employees are still very bad. Meaning long hours, tight spaces, and dangerous work conditions. It is true that China has a lot of issues, but since 50 years ago, this country went from negative to positive. And the single child law is not in order anymore, meaning a Chinese couple can have more than one baby now. But one of the biggest drawbacks of this law was that the population of Chinese men are a lot higher than the Chinese women, meaning compared to 114 men, there's only 100 women. Because when there was a single child law, everybody wanted a boy, and that is why there's a lot less women now. Even though these stats don't really mean something, but it's a huge problem for Chinese men because they can't find wives. The regular stats shows there's 98 men for 100 women. Meaning in the real world, there's less men than women. But China has a huge gap, and the men are way more than the women. China's goal is to be a global superpower in the economy department. China's economy is really close to the US. US's economy right now is $22.5 trillion, and China's economy is $16.5 trillion. It's getting close. Do you guys think that China will pass the US? Please comment.